Hi, I'm Dr. Gwen. I'm a clinical psychologist who's been empowering disabled individuals, their families, and their support systems for over 20 years. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to my channel, where I curate tools, share mindsets, and promote habits to help the neurodiverse community thrive. Also, hit that notification bell so that you don't miss a thing. In this episode, I interview Dr. James Williams, Chief Operating Officer and National Pre-ETS Director at Bloom Consulting. As an experienced certified rehabilitation counselor, an advanced certified autism specialist, an adjunct professor at Northwestern College-Iowa, and a certified special education teacher, James brings serious street cred to the world of transition and vocational services for individuals with autism and other disabilities. James tells us about Campus Connections, a research-based start-to-closure program that actively supports college students and connects them to post-graduation job placement. James's passion is absolutely infectious, and his love of meaningfully supporting neurodivergent and disabled adults is evident. I hope this interview leaves you as energized as it left me. Enjoy. Hi, James. Welcome to the channel. Thanks for being here.
Definitely. Glad to be here.
So I'm just being greedy, and I'm just wanting everyone from Bloom Consulting just to talk to me.
You're gonna interview all of us. You're like
Everyone,
all of it.
just
You're gonna interrogate all of us. I love
line you all up and let's do it. And it's because I'm so incredibly excited about what you guys are offering. And so when I interviewed Bruce, I didn't realize that you guys had started this Campus Connections program. And then he had just dropped it, like it was like a tease. And then I said to
it.
him off the interview after, I was like, why are you holding out? And who do I got to talk to about that program? So thank you for being
Yeah.
here. But maybe before we get into Campus Connections, can you tell me and the audience about yourself?
Sure. So I come from a kind of a varied background, but it all makes sense when I explain it. So I was a public and private special ed teacher originally, and like a lot of folks, I love the kids. I love the work. I love teaching. I still love teaching. I teach at the online with graduate students and undergrads to get my teaching fix. So I love teaching, but I discovered, like a lot of folks, especially in public school special ed, and not just in Texas but everywhere, that the paperwork sucks and nobody wants to do it and nobody has time to do it and really do the good work you need to do, which is work with parents and families and students. And that's where I had to kind of make a choice professionally and as an educator. Okay, I want to keep doing this. I don't want to go work at Starbucks or Walmart, but
Mhm.
I also don't want to do it like this. I want to do it differently.
Yeah.
So that's what I did is I started researching fields and started looking at, okay, well, what fields are out there. And I discovered I was teaching middle school at the time. And I discovered I really loved transition work. I loved with my eighth graders getting them ready and starting that conversation about, hey, you're going to go to high school next year. What's that going to look like? You're going to, going to be getting a job in not that long. What's that going to look like? And I discovered, well, hey, there's some fields out there that just deal with transition. So I discovered, hey, I'm in the right place, but I need to really shift what I'm doing. So I fell in love with transition and started getting my master's in rehabilitation counseling, which I have now, and I'm certified rehab counselor, and went through that prospect or that program really to better understand how to help individuals with disabilities get jobs. But as part of that journey, go through training and college and certificates and all that stuff to get to whatever that job goal is that they want. So not just jobs, but also college and if that's a part of the equation, or training if that's part of the equation. So did that and really enjoyed that. And so I started working just before I met Bruce, a long time ago in Houston. Started working for a provider that worked with our state VR in Texas, doing just that, and discovered that I love that work, but I wanted to go even more specifically, and I wanted to get more involved. So I wanted to do more vocational assessment, which is actually how I first met Bruce, because him and I were both doing that work and we kind of met and we're thrilled to meet each other. This is before I worked for him about, oh gosh, probably 7, 8 years ago, and discovered, hey, you do that work? No way, I do that work. I don't know anybody else who does. And this, of course, before we knew you, before we knew really anybody outside of Texas. And so that was really exciting, and so I wanted to go into that. Also decided, hey, I really love going to school. I want to get my doctorate. So I did that. I got my doctorate in educational leadership, but my dissertation study focused on autism and employment. So we looked at
Mm.
basically parent factors. So what families do and what parents do, and how does it lead to success? Does it lead to success? It was a quantitative study. Does it lead to success in employment for adults with autism 26 and older? And I can talk more about that later. But that was a kind of another piece of my journey. And so came to work with Bruce, and we started out really focusing more on the job placement support employment. So helping people with disabilities get into jobs, which is great work. And it's still work that we do to this day. But my love has been, and really always will be, two things. One, training, one, evaluation, doing vocational assessments, giving families and students pathways and guidance, which I know you love doing as well.
Yeah.
And then the second piece is training, being able to actually provide the training. So instead of saying, you know what, you need a bunch of training and it's bad that you didn't get it and I don't know where to send you, I want to be able to actually do the training, or not just me, but my staff, my team can actually do that training. And so that's really what I'm doing now, and really what my focus is. And what it kind of naturally led to what you talked about when we first got on a second ago, which was Campus Connections. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that program in a little bit, but that's really where it all kind of came together of, okay, I know college is an important part of the piece, but we're missing something. We're just getting students through college. And this is something that the research tells us. We're just getting students through college, but we're not getting them from college to a job. We're getting them from high school to college. Maybe we're getting them through college with some support, which is great. But then they're graduating to the couch anyways with a bunch of student loan debt. And what changed? Well,
Yeah.
they have a college degree and that's about it. So that's an issue and something we have to address. So my idea with Campus Connections was, okay, take the college support piece because it is crucial, but then connect it to job placement. So actually, basically what I call a start to closure program, just getting a student out of high school, helping them get through college, not only hopefully get through, but thrive in college, enjoy that experience, get through it, get to the end, and get to the point where they're ready to get a job and graduate and get a job, and us provide that support too. So we're not just graduating them to the couch, we're graduating them to the job that is in their degree field that they want. Ironically, the same thing, right, that everybody wants, with or without disability. So that is a huge part of it. So that's a little bit about my background. Again, I share my degrees, originally in special ed. And of course with Bloom, I'm not going to go too much into because you and Bruce have talked, but like I said, my baby is Campus Connections, our training piece, and then staff development. I really love supporting my staff and my team. I'm only one person, but I've trained some really amazing people that are really being my extra hands and are helping us really spread our services across Texas, Nevada, California, and hopefully eventually nationwide. So.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's so exciting, and that it's, whether this was going to happen or not, I think the pandemic really, in many ways, forced us to try these models of virtual,
Yes.
remote types of learning. And what we're seeing come out of it are these types of programs that are able to help people across state lines, across the nation, across the world. I mean, it's so cool. I love this idea of this start to closure program. And I know that you and I, when we spoke and connected before this, we were just talking about our mutual frustration with transition programs, transitioning people to nowhere. Like, where are
Literally
you?
nowhere.
Nowhere. Back home, actually. Like, so we actually reversed. Like, we didn't even, we were going somewhere and then we just reversed course. So this idea of connecting in real time with skills and practical guidance, connecting someone all the way from training to job. And I know, Bruce is so proud of his stats. People are like, sports people are proud of their stats. Bruce is like, yeah, we've like placed over 1,500 people. I mean, he's so, and it's so awesome, that like, those are our stats. We like that. And that's really awesome because I see the same thing. I see, and as I do an assessment, I'm like, this is what you need.
Yes.
I don't really know where you get that, but now there's something here. So let's get into it so let's talk about Campus Connections. Can you share with us, like the model of Campus Connections, because it comes from research roots and like evidence-based roots.
Correct. So how it really started is, and I'm going to talk about the program that preceded us because it's really where the research is from. So, and actually, I'm going to go back even further because the research that inspired that program is really where we need to start. So way back in 1980s, when I was a very young little person, I always tell people, people are like, "You look so young," and I was like, "Yeah, I don't feel so young, but I guess I am, relatively speaking." So basically, the idea back in the 80s was, we need to look at a different way to approach people with mental illness and with significant, disability and psychiatric illness. And rather than look at all their deficits, which, with a significant diagnosis, let's say schizoaffective schizophrenia, yeah, there is some significant deficits. But we need to also really kind of flip the script and look at, okay, everybody has strengths though, including people that have severe mental illness, including people that have some, even in medical or severe medical issues. We need to look more critically at what we consider a strengths-based approach, right? We need to look at their strengths. We need to value those and actually focus on those. And that's nothing hugely earth-shattering in 2021, but it was really earth-shattering in 1980. Remember, this is very close to after passage of Americans with Disabilities Act. People with disabilities were still very much overlooked, very much marginalized, much more so than even now. And so it was revolutionary. So that idea is called wraparound. And so wraparound originated in the 80s, and it was a strengths-based approach where you basically had a family, you had an individual with usually, like I said, in this case, it was mental illness, disability. They broadened that over time, but you had this individual, and it was just like it says, you wrap around support around that individual. Meaning you get everybody involved. You get their parents involved. You get their psychologists. You get everybody in their life, their teachers, anyone who touches them, anybody who they work with, and you build this what we call wraparound team. And that wraparound team then worked with the individual to identify their strengths, and then as part of that identification, take them and make them into concrete goals. And a model that I tell people, it's a lot like, and a lot of people know it, is person-centered planning, PCPs. Very, very similar to person-centered planning. It kind of was the precursor, if you will, to person-centered planning. And so very, very similar. And basically that strengths-based approach, just like person-centered planning, leads to this development of a positive strengths-based approach and plan for the individual to achieve whatever they wanted to achieve. And with wraparound in the 80s, it wasn't just college. In fact, it wasn't college. It was, how are you going to, take your medication stably and continuously? How are you going to stay out of prison? How are you going to stay out of the hospital? It was much more what I would call like basic needs. How are you going to feed yourself, clothe yourself, things like that. And so what they realized though was, wait a second, this strength-based approach works really well for more people than just people with mental illness, and it works really well for more than just teenagers, which is what it was started with. This works really well with adults. This works really well with 50, 60, 70, 80-year-olds. Why not? And so over the years in the 90s, they started expanding the use of wraparound, and the model became more and more popular, and really just kind of began to proliferate across the country. It was used with NAMI, it was used with National Mental Health, and really just kind of started to proliferate. Well, in the 90s, the person that we're working with that's helping us develop and roll out Campus Connections, Dr. Deanne Lechtenberger, was a federal trainer of the wraparound model. She actually worked in DC. It was in her former life before she went into higher education, and was training people on this model. So fast forwarding a little bit to early mid 2000s, Deanne said, the wraparound model is great, but I feel like it's so much more applicable than people give it credit for. I think we really need to broaden its use and see where it could be effective. So Deanne at the time had been working as a faculty member at Texas Tech University in Lubbock, Texas, Northwest Texas. And she was like, hey, we really need a college support program. And we do. We have all these individuals with autism that need support and need help. And disability services is just not cutting it. Accommodations are just not enough. Even if they're comprehensive, they're just not enough. And I know you see that all the time.
Yep. So
what she did at that point is she approached her disability services folks. She approached the college she was at and said, hey, if I can bring in a grant, I have a program I want to try. I want to pilot it. I want to do research. I want to run it. But if I can bring in a grant, will you let me do it? And they said, sure. If you bring in your own money, do whatever you want. That's how universities are. So, so that's what she did. So she actually went to the Texas Council for Developmental Disabilities in Texas and got it funded for 5 years. And so she got awarded this grant, and basically they were allowed to accept 20 students with at this time it was limited because TCDD is just DD, which includes autism and things. It was just developmental disabilities. So it was autism, developmental disabilities. I think she was allowed to take like learning disabilities, but it had to be a clear developmental disability connection. It couldn't just be like a physical disability or visual impairment alone, things like that. And so she started that model, and she rolled out the program at Texas Tech, and they started off with 10 students. It was very, very small. It was just, I mean, it was just like all good pilots. It was just a
Hmm.
small group of students. It was her and one staff member who was a former teacher. Deanne trained her in the wraparound model. They brought in an assessment called the Berkman, which we're also using with Campus Connections because of what it does. We'll talk about that more in a bit. And basically that program really birthed or was kind of the precursor to Campus Connections. And so over the years, Deanne actually ran that program, grant funded through TCDD for 5 years. Well, they got to the end of the grant, and like most things, TCDD grants are meant to be time limited, and you're meant to become self-sustaining. So Deanne had to figure out, okay, well, this grant's going away. How do I keep these students funded? How do I keep the program going? Meanwhile, she's collecting lots of data, more and more data every year in cohort 1 through cohort 5 up to that 5th year. And at that point in cohort 5, I think she had like 30 students. It had grown quite a bit. And again, it was all being funded fully through TCDD. So families and parents weren't paying anything additional beyond just the tuition they were to go to Texas Tech as a typical college student. So, which was awesome. And so they did that. And Deanne at that time approached vocational rehab and said, look, this grant's going away, but is this something you guys would fund? She spent a good year or two going through that process and got funding, was able to basically, as the grant ended, was able to convert families that were eligible to VR funding, or families that didn't want to mess with VR or just, didn't qualify for whatever reason, just didn't feel like filling out the forms. They were able to be privately funded. And so that's what they did. And so that's, kind of where it shifted to. And to this day, the CASE program is in existence at Texas Tech. It's still VR funded. It's still going strong. And Deanne ran it for 3 more years until last year, when something called COVID disrupted
What?
all of our lives.
What's that?
Yeah, what's that? Exactly, what's that? And so when something disrupted all of our lives, and Deanne was about a year or 2 from retirement, and she said, you know what, just kidding, let's retire now. So she did. And she stepped out. Deanne's I'm trying to get her upper 60s. She's relatively healthy, but like everybody has some things, and it was like, I just can't make that risk. And so she did that. She retired officially. But if you ever met Deanne, you'll know about her that she is not someone that can retire and go home and watch Golden Girls and sit on her couch.
Right.
She is just not that person. She has to be helping students. She's a former teacher like me. She has to help students. And so she did that, and she said, "Hey, James, I love CASE and I love what we built, but let's plus it. Let's make it better, and let's do that by taking the college program model we used and wraparound, which is very successful, taking the Berkman, which we use, which is very successful, and making that into and adding on a piece that's missing, which is career, and basically helping our students come out of the program and then get a job." And so basically, that's where I came in and where Bloom came in. Is we're the experts in employment and disability. She's the experts in college support. She ran a program for 8 years, has the model behind her, and all the training and knowledge to do it. And so she just literally came and trained us. We merged in our two brains together. It's taken a good year to get everything on paper and get everything kind of flushed out, as I'm sure you know, one that takes a long time. But we got there. And the exciting part is meanwhile, we've been collecting data, and I was a part of the original article. So we have been collecting data with Deanne and I, because I worked as a consultant with the CASE program, just because I'm a big supporter and believer in it, and still am. And so we've been collecting that data. And so with that 8 years of data, when she retired, they were able to pull that together. And we were able to get a journal article published. And I don't know if I sent you the article, but I can.
Yeah.
Okay, I will write a note to do that. I'm going to send you the article, and I'll send you the link too.
Yeah, and I'll put the link in the description too.
Awesome. Let me
James, I mean, I think it's so important. I mean, as you talk about the evolution here of Campus Connections,
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And so we were excited. So that got published a couple months ago. As you know, it always takes a long time. And of course, we revised it. It took 3 years of revisions, but it's okay. It's beautiful. I love it. So it's worth the 3 years to revise it. And so what was great is what came out of that article is not only is the wraparound model a good fit for college students, and not only does it have measurable both quantitative and qualitative improvement, and we saw that. On top of that, what was not surprising to you and I, but really good to see on paper, is that strengths-based approach is really powerful. It really motivated students to help themselves and to
Yes.
work with her team to help themselves versus being told what to do, being talked down to, being deficits based, and it's an awesome article. So I could spend all day rehashing it, but I'll send it to you, and you can post the link so folks that watch can read it as well. It's not an easy read. I'm not going to lie, it's pretty deep, but we've got some great graphs and charts, and I'm a picture person, so I love that. But definitely look into that. And so this is just, by the way, and this is one of many studies to come. What we want to do now is, as we launch Campus Connections in the fall, is we're going to start taking our own data in the same kind of data set and style that they did, but we're also going to do a piece they didn't, which is we're going to track employment post program,
Mm-hmm.
and that's something that they don't have data on. They have very rough, like, anecdotal data, but not really. Not really to the degree that we're going to. And so we're really excited about that, to really add on to that and kind of keep it moving. So that's kind of our background. As part of the data, or as part of the research that needs to be discussed, is the two assessments we use. So one of them is the Berkman, that has been around also since, gosh, probably I think even before the early '80s, and it's the Berkman method assessment. Basically, it's a personality assessment that also looks at connections between how people work in groups. It's very similar, if you've ever done something like the DISC profile before, very similar to the DISC. Really, really cool. So that's been around for a long time. That's actually also what was kind of groundbreaking, is that's something that's not traditionally been used with people with disabilities. It was originally normed on CEOs and executives of companies, is what it was used for, to talk to them about how they could work with their team and their employees. Deanne integrated it as part of her model back when she started CASE, and found it to be really, really effective. And there's a lot of details on that in the article as well. Then the other assessment piece that Bloom is adding in to Campus Connections to kind of, again, plus it and make it better, is the COP system. And the COP system is a great assessment. And I know when you're familiar with it. And the reason we wanted the COPs in there is and it's not a weakness. The Berkman folks are very honest about it when you ask them what their assessment does and doesn't cover. But it doesn't, the Berkman measures what you're interested in, your personality, your stress responses, all good stuff. But it doesn't say, can you do it? Do you have the ability to do that job? Do you have the ability to do it? And that's where the COPS comes in, is we really are able to use the CAPS portion of the COPS system to really explain, do you have the ability to do that job you're interested in? Because frankly, ability is really important. If you're an individual with a disability who's been in resource classes, your ability may or may not be there for the career you want to do. Even more so, if you're somebody who's been in modified classes your whole academic career, your ability may not be there, even though your interest is there.
Yes.
And I see that a lot, especially with folks on the spectrum and individuals with learning disabilities. Really, really see that all the time. So those are the other two pieces. And of course, COPS, again, research base has been around for a long, long time. I believe in the early '80s, I believe, for the COPS. So, really, really good material there that we have. Other things I want to go just based on questions, locations. So, right now, we're launching it in August in really two states to start, and that's Texas and Nevada. In Texas, we are launching it with Concordia University and Sam Houston State University. One is in the Austin area, one's in the Houston area. To start, we plan on having a lot more. We'll also be serving students virtually across the state of Texas, no matter where they go to school. That's what I'm really excited about as well, and we talked about that earlier. Nevada will be serving Truckee Mountains Community College and Western Nevada College in Carson City and Reno. And then University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and College of Southern Nevada, which is also in Las Vegas as well. And that's where we're starting in August. But we'll also be serving folks virtually in Nevada. And then what I'm really excited about, and I hope this becomes even more so in the future, is we're serving college students in California virtually. And so we're starting that process, and that's been private, paid by families. I know, and I know you're excited. We're excited about that. I don't plan that to be the end, though. I told folks, my goal this August is to launch in Nevada and Texas, do it right, do it well. And then my next target in August of what would be 2022 would be to not only, grow in California, but really look at, can we get other sources of funding, whether it's regional centers, VR, whatever, really, really try to see what else we can do to create private pay and state-funded options, because I'm a big believer in both. I think, some families have to have those state-funded options. Some families would rather just private pay and not fool with it, and I understand both and get both. So we really we always try to do most of our services. We always try to offer kind of a hybrid for whatever works best for families. So, and for students. So that's exciting. And we really want to grow things in California. We also really want to start offering in-person supports in California at some point too. And so, over the next year or two, my staff is we're going to really be reaching out to a lot of institutions there, both community colleges, technical schools, 4-year, 2-year schools, having those conversations about, what, are they interested in working with us? Because
Yes.
I think the coolest thing about Campus Connections is it's not limited. It doesn't have to be limited to one campus. It's a program that's funded externally from the school and run externally, which poses challenges, but honestly, from what I've seen, it's actually more of a benefit because aren't tied up with any of the politics in university or college. We're not tied up with any of the rules, regulations, lawyers, MOUs, all that fun stuff. We can focus on delivering the services students need, customized to what they need, period. And that can be our focus, and that is our focus. So I'm really excited about that, and so we can really continue to expand, as we go forward. Student profile, a lot of different students can be helped with this program. In terms of disability, we really aren't limited to just autism. That's another thing we've expanded from the case model is we're not just focusing on autism and specifically DD, where we really want to work with students with traumatic brain injuries, learning disabilities, ADHD, you name it. If they need support to get through college and to get a job, we want to provide that support. That said, it's easier to talk about who we're not a good fit for.
Yeah.
We're not a good fit for a student who wants a college experience, but not a college education or degree or certificate. What I mean by that is there's a lot of really great think college models out there where they're really focused on students with intellectual disabilities who want to be on a college campus, socialize on a college campus, maybe take some informal classes, CE coursework. Those are wonderful programs, and they're absolutely needed for that population. But that's not what we're serving. We're serving degree-seeking students, certificate-seeking students who can do the work. They can handle the rigors academically, but they need to do so with a lot of support, and they don't have enough support just through disability services. That's where we come in, and that's the student we're really targeting and wanting to serve. Again, there's a need for all those programs. I always tell people I'm a big believer in no program is for everyone, and we have to really focus on what we do well and target those students that we can support the best.
Yeah. And James, go back to that distinction really quick.
Sure.
It's not for someone that wants a college experience. It's for someone that is college. What did you say?
It's for someone that wants a college degree or certificate. There's somebody that can handle that college coursework but they need support to do so. So that's where we come in,
Yep.
and that's why we're here. But for example, if a student, and I'll give you a good example, if we got a student, let's say, that is taking developmental classes in English, math, and all their subjects, they've taken them 4 times in a row, they can't pass them. That's not somebody that we can serve. That's not, that's an issue of, they aren't at the capacity, the achievement, the ability level to do college coursework, unfortunately.
Yeah.
That's not something we could fix. And I'm never going to tell a family we can, or tell a student that we could help them when we can. But we definitely can help someone. As another example of a good fit for us, we can definitely help an individual with high functioning autism who needs support with executive functioning, managing their schedule, getting projects done, communicating with professors and disability services and faculty. And they need that support, but they can totally do the math. They can do the English. They can do the coursework and get through it. That's who we're really designed to support. And surprisingly, what I've learned, at least, and I can't speak for California, I can only speak for Texas and Nevada, where we are for the most part right now. That's not the norm. Most programs tend to focus more on the college experience piece,
Yes.
not the college degree seeking student. That's the word you were looking for. Degree seeking student. That was when you were saying, "What that word?" That was the word.
Right.
And again, there's a need for those programs, but we're trying to. I'm a big believer in. I'm not going to spend my time as a professional and an educator creating a program that already exists. I'm going to spend my time creating a service that is needed and to fill a gap and a hole of something that isn't there.
Yeah.
And that's another reason why with our program, we actually are specifically telling families if they reach out to us and they want to go to a school that already has a similar program, whether that's Texas Tech or Marshall University, West Virginia, any of these schools that have wonderful post-secondary support programs, we want you to go to that program. We don't want you to come to us and then we force our way into a place where there's already a support system. That's not what it's about. We want you to go to who's already there. What we're really for is the students where there is no support. It's disability services or nothing. That's all they have. Those are the schools where students need support. That's where we want to be able to support them and help them get through that journey. Time frame in the program for most students. Time frame is always a good question. To be honest and truthful, it's going to depend on the student.
Yeah.
They don't have to be freshmen when they start with us. They could be a sophomore, or a junior, or even a senior that just needs support getting through college, finishing, completing, getting to a job. That's fine. They could come with us and start with us which I would love, start with us in coming out of high school straight through, and we provide support for 4 years and help them get a job. That's awesome. We can definitely do that. And obviously I want to do that if we can, but they don't have to. So the time frame really is flexible. We are asking families that work with us, whether VR funded or privately funded, to at least commit to a semester. The reason why is because it takes time for my staff to develop rapport with students. It takes time for us to set up a wraparound meeting and a plan and time to implement it. And so a week or 2 weeks is not going to be enough time for them to know if we're a good fit or if they're a good fit for us. It's just not. So we ask them to commit to a semester. That's it. Beyond that, we'll work with them. If they need to start later in the semester because they didn't find us till September, totally fine. We'll work with them. What we do basically is our enrollment's going to be running, and it's going to be ongoing enrolling at the first of the month. So basically, if a student talks to us in September, they can totally start with us in the first week of October. That gives us time to get all the forms in, get funding in place, and then start of the following month. So we're totally fine with doing that, because we know, sometimes a student, I'll give you another example. Let's say a student starts and they say, you know what, I got this.
Yeah.
Then they get to October. I don't got this. So then they're like, hey, help, I need help. And so that's okay. And we don't want to turn that student down. So we want to support them if we can. But again, we have that not open enrollment, rolling enrollment,
Rolling enrollment
to allow for that. To allow for that piece. And I think that's really crucial. And then last piece, I have, in just general talk, cost. If it's VR funded, there is no cost for the families. So we already have our contract in Nevada. We'll be able to take 20 students at each of those campuses I mentioned, up to 20, no more than 20, VR funded, starting in fall. But if we, fill up those slots or what have you, we do offer the service private pay as well. In both Texas and Nevada, that private pay cost is $1,000 a month. Which is really not a lot of money for what we do. They're getting weekly support groups. They're getting all kinds of things. You can go on our website and look at all what they get, but it's a lot of services for a small amount of money. And we did that on purpose. We really wanted to make it as accessible to all families as possible, whether or not they're hooked up with VR, whether or not that's something they want to do or can do. And so that's important. Our Texas contract is still pending, but we should have that in the next month or two. So, hopefully soon we'll be able to also, provide that service for families. I don't see any reason why we won't be able to, but that process takes a while. So that's the basics in terms of cost as well.
Nice. Hey, James, you use this abbreviation VR.
Yes.
Can you just like define that for people?
Sure. Well, and it's funny because I'm talking and looking at you, and I'm like, Gwen knows everything. I'm like, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? But someone watching is like, what the heck's this guy talking about? So VR is vocational rehabilitation. So if you're not aware, at the federal level, there is a VR program partnership, which basically means that the federal government in each state has to have a VR program. It's not optional. You have to have one. You can't just say, oh, no, we're not doing that. You have to do it. Now, how you do it, what it looks like, very much does vary state to state. And it's literally apples and, rocks. I mean, there's no connection, but they have to exist, right? So every state has a VR program. And again, all of them run it differently. Some of their services are different. Some of their funding sources are different. Some have a lot of money in VR. Some have very little. But it's a federal state partnership designed around one goal, and that is helping people with disabilities, very broad term, disabilities in general, all disabilities, return and or begin and maintain sustained work. So basically getting a job, that's the whole purpose. And so they help pay for all kinds of different things. But the key word is anything they pay for has to lead towards an employment outcome, which is what we want. That's my background. I'm a VR person. That's my background. That's what I believe in too. They don't just pay for services for the sake of services. They pay for services that lead to an employment outcome, as it should be. And so that's the focus there. And so that's what VR is. Again, every state is different. They're also even more confusing. They're all called something different, which is so frustrating because I tell parents in one state and they're like, I don't know if we have that. And I'm like, trust me, you do have it. You just don't know what it's called, or it's changed its name recently. Ours has changed its name like 5 times in my lifetime. So that gives you an idea of how hard it is to even find it. But it does exist out there, and VR can be an amazing resource. And what I tell people is, VR, a little quick history lesson, really came out of World War II. It came out of, Vietnam War, World War II, Korean War. We had all these vets coming home that, yes, they needed VA support and they got it, but they also needed help with employment because they had disabilities caused by war, traumatic brain injuries, amputations, visual impairments, you name it, PTSD, list goes on. And so VR was started originally with the intent of, hey, we're going to help vets, but it's not that way now. VR is very broad. And again, any disability generally qualifies. The only thing I will say is that some states tend to focus more on people with more significant disabilities in terms of their services. And then some VRs tend to focus on a broader group. Like in Texas, Nevada, they're pretty broad. They serve pretty much any disability, really pretty much any age. Once they're about 14, 15, they're going to start serving them. So it's real broad. Another comparison of a state nearby, Arizona, however, is totally different. In Arizona, they have what's called order of selection. So they really only focus on serving the most significantly disabled individuals with that meet. Usually they have to have 3 or more impairments on a certain list to even qualify. So again, it does vary in every state. So if you have folks watching from other states, your state is going to be unique, I promise you. And so just keep that in mind. But that is generally what we talk about when we say VR.
VR. Yeah. And in California, that's run by the Department of Rehabilitation.
Okay, got it.
And so that's our governing body, or our state body that handles the
Yes.
VR responsibilities and funds.
Gotcha.
Yeah. No, I know it's different everywhere. I mean, I think it's great.
Yeah, and
You know,
yeah, it's confusing. And ours doesn't even have VR in the name, which is even more ridiculous. Ours is like it's Texas Workforce Solutions. Well, no, it does. It has Vocational Rehabilitation Services, but everybody calls it by its acronym, which is TWSVRS, which means nothing. Like nobody knows what that means. And so yeah, it's hilarious. That's the new name, and no one can figure it out.
right. So James, a student, as long as they're at that college where you are located, and they can be part of that cohort, they can use that service. They can use this service for as long as they're enrolled there, right?
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
For as long as they're enrolled there. Well, and honestly, even if they move schools. So let's say, now we haven't tested this yet, but I'm certainly open to testing it. If let's say they started at a community college
Yep.
and went for 2 years, got an associate's, and then went on to the local university, we really could and very much plan to transfer with them and bring the support to the new
Great.
school with them.
Great. Yeah. So there's not like a time limit. So I think some people are used to this idea of transition programs. This is not a transition program, but just in case, people get this confused, some transition programs are 2 years done, 3 years
Yep.
done. Like
Yep.
there is no continuation in that. And obviously, you and I both know that those ebb and flow.
Yes.
But this is not the same. This is not the same as that. So I just want to make sure that people understand that.
Very much. Very much.
Yeah.
And it's based on student need.
Yeah.
A great example I give because people understand this. BCBAs, ABA therapy. It is not, any good therapist will tell you the goal is not for them to need us for life. The goal is for us to teach them and fade away. And honestly, our program's no different. If we need to support a student for 6 years to get them through a bachelor's and a master's degree, and they need us, we're there totally. But if they don't, that's okay too. If we get a student that comes in their freshman year, and I've told this to VR because VR's had this question. They're like, look, does that mean every student we send you, we're going to pay for them for 4 years? No. I mean, I don't know, maybe, but no, like that's not what we intend. What we're saying is we're going to support them as long as you'll fund them and they need our support. So let's say Jimmy starts with us his freshman year. He gets 2 years in and he's just rocking it. He's doing great at college. He's got friends. He's involved with social activities. He's already lining up job offers. He's just blowing it out of the water. Great. That's a conversation we'll have with Jimmy. And Jimmy may say, you know what? I don't need campus connections anymore. And we're going to say, that's great. Congrats, Jimmy. Let's throw you a party. And you don't, and that's okay. So I think that's another thing that I think sometimes scares families is they need to understand it's not that we are going to go away or we want to go away, but we also don't want to support a student who doesn't need our support.
Yeah.
And at some point, some students are going to need all 4 years to go through a bachelor's and are going to need us every step of the way. And that's great. And some are just not. And we're okay with both.
Yeah. And how important is that philosophically and from a communication standpoint when we are providing service? If we are doing for you what you can do for yourself, that's really disempowering. Actually,
Very
that's
much.
not the message that's not the kind of support we want to give. What we say is, good, look, we see your competence. We know you try your best. We know we're going to give you the skills and the supports you need
Yes.
to you that you're going to
Yes.
have, and you're going to take them for yourself.
Yes. Well, isn't that what college is for, right?
Yeah.
For all students, not just people with disabilities. No,
Yeah.
to take that out of the equation. What is college about? College is about developing a set of skill sets. Despite what people think, it's not about earning a sheet of paper, although I know that is what people value, and I understand why. But that's not what it's about. It's about teaching you skills for employment. It's about teaching you skills for becoming an independent, successful adult, period,
Yes.
disability aside. And I think, going into it with that mindset makes our program really clear, makes it very clear in terms of where we are, where we're not. My colleague Deanne brings up, great example people all know. She's like, this is a teach students how to fish program, not a fish for you program.
Yes.
And she even says that when she presents, because she's like, I don't want families to think, oh, I'm sending my son to, to Campus Connections and Bloom's going to take care of it. No, that's not what we're doing. That's not what you're doing. You're
Yeah.
sending that student to us. You're working with them because we're going to help Sammy or your son. We're going to help him learn how to fish for himself. Help
Yeah.
him learn how to communicate with professors. Help him learn how to talk to disability services.
Yeah.
Help him learn how to work with a future employer. That's what we're going to do.
Yeah, it's all, I think those of us that are in the disability world that come at it from a strengths-based perspective and a real solution-focused, skills-based
Yes.
kind of perspective, like these are, I tend to hang around these people.
That's
And
good.
yeah,
So do I.
and that idea of with, not for,
Yes.
I do with the person to help them learn the skills. I don't do it for the person. And how, conceptually it's so important that we keep that, because if we don't do
Yeah.
that, then we don't communicate that the person we're working with is competent
Correct. Oh,
or
and
that we have
we
hope.
build dependence. Well, we
I know.
build dependence
I
on
know.
us. The one
Yes.
of the terms I just detest is the idea of learned helplessness and special education. As a former special ed teacher, I'm sorry, we're the worst about it. We're the worst at fostering learned helplessness with students,
Agreed.
and we
Agreed.
have to stop. Like that's a huge issue because we serve those students at Bloom and helping them get a job even outside of Campus Connections. And they all of a sudden are confused as why we're saying, well, you need to call your boss if you're sick. You need to call your boss. And they would say,
Yeah.
well, when I was in the school, my job coach did that for me. Why? You can do that. You have 130 IQ. You have high functioning autism. You can pick up the phone and dial the numbers. You're okay. Like you can totally do that.
Yes.
And in fact, you should. And so sometimes
Yes.
we're untraining that learned helplessness, and we're saying, no, you got this.
Yeah.
And I know you may not know how. And I will say there's a big difference here too between skills deficit and performance deficit, right? If they don't know how, because we've had students that are like, hey, I'll call disability services, but what do I say when the lady answers the phone? And that is a valid question.
Totally.
And we said, here, guess what? We'll work on a script with you. We'll help you with that. That's what we're here for.
Yeah.
But when it comes to who's pressing the numbers and who's speaking, it's going to be you, and you're going to have to be okay with that. And so that's the kind of compromise we could do. And again, skills are fine. We're happy to teach skills. That's what Campus Connections is about. But we don't want to perform it for the student. We don't want to take away their necessity to perform and be a college student.
Yeah, I love that different. I love I love it when we get to split hairs like that, because it seems like a very small difference, but actually it's a very big difference, right?
It's huge.
Skills deficits versus performance deficits. And how often do we see that the individual that we're supporting has the skills, but the performance is lacking because
Yes.
one, they never had the opportunity or the expectations that they
Demonstrate.
right to
Mhm.
demonstrate it, and how important that is. The one pet peeve that I have all the time is, when I've got a very capable high schooler who has a one-on-one and they have a note taker,
Oh, God.
and then we get to
Yep.
the IEP and we're talking, and I said, well, why are there no goals on this person taking their own notes? Because they're going to college, and they're like, oh, well, they have a one-on-one. And I'm like, yes, but the one-on-one's not following them to college, and that's not an
I was like, are
accommodation.
you
I mean, like,
funding that student to have your district employee go with them to college? And I was
right.
like, really?
So you're
Yeah.
right. Like the system's complicit
Yes.
in the learned
Very much so.
helplessness. And then parents get anxious because they've never seen their child do it.
Yes.
Right. So
Well, then
it's
they
just
say
this,
things like, well, he can't do that.
right.
Like you said, oh, he can't do that. And then I ask the question, has he? Have you tried?
Yeah.
Oh, well, no. Well, then how can you say you can't? You've never tried.
Yeah.
Like
And
you can't say that statement if you've never tried.
yeah. And don't you feel like we are really bad at predicting what is absolutely going to work? I mean, it's almost like
Yes.
you got to try something and you got to go for it. And then we learn a lot about
Yes.
how we meet you.
Yes.
And you just need to know that you have the support to make the mistake. It's
Yes.
not a big deal.
Well, and
We'll help
sometimes
you with
as a provider, we also learn, I tell my staff this all the time. Sometimes we work with a client on a job site and we step back and we say, man, Johnny's got this. He doesn't need me here. And we step back. And then we realize, whoops, we stepped back too far. Just kidding. And then we push ourselves back in him because he needs the support.
Yeah.
That's okay. It's okay to do that. And I tell people it's the same thing. We're going to give students as much room as we can to show us what they're capable of, to let their strengths shine through. That's what we're going to do. But we also are going to be able to push in when we need to, because there are times when, like you said, we get it wrong. My staff are not, we're not magicians. We're not perfect. We don't see inside every student's mind and know, oh, he's got this. I can tell by looking at him, he's got this. No, I wish I was that good. I'm not that good.
Yeah, me too.
I don't know that, but I can tell you with Bruce, the term Bruce uses, which I love, is he says that's not likely or that is likely, because there are a lot of things in life that are likely or not likely, but that's not saying that's yes, they're going to happen or no, they're not. Because there's a lot of gray area between yes and no, and especially in our field, we have to acknowledge that sometimes we go in and we make a recommendation and it's tried and it doesn't work the way we thought it was going to work, and so then we have to get with that family again or that VR counselor again and say, you know what? Tried it, didn't work. Let's move on. Let's learn from this and let's do it better. And here's another thing we can try. And that's okay to have that. I don't know, and I don't want to get on a soapbox here, Gwen, but I really feel like I see a lot of challenges with, to be fair, not just people with disabilities, but kind of the current generation of college students and high school students we have is this intense fear of failure. To the point where they're paralyzed to act because they're so worried they're not going to get it right.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to yourself, nobody in life ever gets anything right all the time. That's not reasonable. You're setting yourself up for an unreasonable expectation. And I think that's so important. And so I tell my students, I've done a presentation and literally the title of it was Prepare for Failure. Failure is inevitable. Because, and we tell people, we teach students in college how to fail.
Yeah.
That's a skill.
Yeah.
It's a skill to accept failure, humble yourself, learn from it, and grow and move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's inevitable.
Yes.
It's inevitable.
You will fail.
Yes.
Period.
Yes. And over and over, like lots of times in lots of iterations, not just once, lots and lots and lots in different intensities, in different duration. So that kind of idea in psychology, we call that distress tolerance, how do we deal with the distress of this? And if you're going to be distressed because your pencil is not the right color, then we got something to work with,
You're gonna have a tough time.
Tough. That's happened where I'm like, oh no, okay.
I don't have my favorite pen.
I know exactly. Exactly. It's these are our best weapons, James. Pens and pencils.
They are.
I love that. Not likely versus likely. That skills deficits versus performance deficits. So good. It's so funny because you brought up, you said earlier, it's like comparing apples to stones. And the other Bruceism that he talks about is the it's about the apple, not the apple slices. And it is so funny that you brought up apples. I'm like,
he does say that, but I did not think about that when I made the connection. That's funny. Yeah, you made a connection that I didn't. Yeah, well, it's funny because we also tend to echo each other. So him and I co-present, and it's hilarious because nobody else gets a word in because between him and I, we're very chatty.
So love it. You love it. Yeah.
But I think part of that is again, is really owning what we don't understand as both parents and professionals and individuals. And college really is a journey. It's not the same journey for everybody.
Yes.
And, even problems, again, I don't want to get on a soapbox, but I think it's something just to really make clear to folks and parents, especially, that's another thing I see. And I have a sister-in-law. She's amazing. She's in college. She's a senior. She's so capable, very smart, brilliant person. But her and I have had that conversation of it's okay to ask for help with the problem, but also be okay with trying to solve it on your own and give it a shot. What could happen? And I see that with a lot of students her age as well, both, again, not disability dependent, where they're not only afraid of failure, they're paralyzed by a problem. And they, and they'll say, well, can you fix it? They'll call you. And I was like, no, that's not how life works. You don't just call me. You try something, it doesn't work. And then you call me and then you say, hey, I tried and it did not work at all. I need help. And that's okay. Yeah. But being willing, again, not just to fail, but to try something and, before just going for help. And I see that a lot with prompt dependence and students with disabilities is they look at the aid. I had a student I was testing one day, literally his aid was sitting not close. He was sitting like, I would say 6 feet this way, maybe. And literally I'd ask him a question and what would he do? Mm-hmm. He'd look at the aid. And like the aide was going to give him the answer and then he was going to put it out of his mouth. And I was like, I'm not assessing him. I'm assessing you.
Yes,
I don't want to know what he thinks. I want to know what you think.
Yeah, that happens with
and
parents.
by the way, this is a very verbal very, very verbal individual with high functioning autism. Like it is not, he speaks beautifully. In fact, he
Yeah.
actually sings and performs in a band. It is not a physical speech production issue.
Yeah,
So,
you're like, we ruled that out. We're really sure. That
yeah,
happens
we're really
with
sure.
me and parents a lot. When we're having, like, I'm doing sessions with a
Yep.
family and we're trying to figure out, what we're just really trying to solve problems together. Like, let's collaborate,
Yes,
let's come
that's what we do.
together on this. What are we going to try? And I'll ask a question that's usually some form of like insightful question. Well, good question. So what have you tried? What is it that you want? What were you trying to say? And I'm like, who are you looking at? But it's
I'm talking to
true.
you. I'm not talking to them.
Exactly. And
And I do that
yeah.
now. I interview. It's funny. Bruce and I talk about this. One of my strategies. A lot of times I won't interview parents and students together anymore for that
Yeah.
reason, because I don't want them to. I don't want them to change their answers because of who's they're present. But I also don't want them to lean too much on one or the other. I'm like, I want to hear what you, mom and dad. I want to hear what you think, and I do. But I want to hear just what you think, and I want to hear just what he thinks or she thinks, because those are both valid and both need to be considered. And it's just amazing what I get, alone with students. Oh my gosh, it's amazing this miraculous change I get when I had a student one time, this was actually about a couple months ago, and he admitted to me, and I was really proud of him because he was a very confident individual, taking AP classes, very smart guy. He said, I don't know. I asked him a question. He said, I don't know. And I said, that's okay. That's normal. That's okay. It's okay not to be able to answer that question, because it was a hard question. It was like, where do you, I think I was like, where do you see yourself 5, 10 years from now? He
Yeah.
said, I don't know. And I said, that's okay. And let's help you figure that out.
Yes.
That's what we're here for. We can help you
Yeah.
figure that out.
Yeah.
But just the fact that he owned that and was willing to admit that he didn't know. And I honestly don't know if he would have ever given me that answer in front of his parents, because I think, he was very concerned, and he shared this with me, that he was very concerned that he was gonna, he didn't say let them down, but not make him happy, or I forget how he said it.
Yep.
Basically not fulfill what they wanted for him.
Yep.
And I said, but that has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
That's them. That's them. Let them worry about that. I joked
Yeah.
with them. I said, let them go talk to somebody about that on their own time. But we're talking
That's
about
their
you.
problem to solve.
Yes, that's
This
their
is
problem.
your
to solve.
problem to solve.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I do. It's so funny that you say that, because now I do student by themselves, parent by
Yep.
themselves, and then I do a
Yep.
family one together.
Yep. Exactly. Exactly.
It's
And let
really,
me guess, you get totally different things too. And then you're trying to figure out, well, who is the most accurate? I don't know,
it's
which is okay
it's
to say.
it's okay, and I'll say that. I was like,
Uh,
gosh, it's like so interesting. And inevitably, I have a teacher or like somebody else that's not part of this family that knows this family, knows the student.
mhm.
I also interview them, and they also fill out some questionnaires and surveys, and I just think that's fantastic. I love it. Hey, James,
Yeah.
let's get down to really quick. Like, can we get down to the nitty gritty of the program? You were talking about there's like individual coaching, there's group stuff. Like, can you I know it's probably on your website, but can you describe some
Yeah.
of those actions that students
Sure.
would be doing?
Sure. So, yeah, I can give you a quick summary. So there's a lot of different things, and again, you can go to our website to get the gist, but I'll give you the 5,000 foot view, if you will. The first piece is assessment. So we use the COP system and the Berkman, along
Mhm.
with any other assessment, neuropsych. So, for instance, let's say they work with you, and they have a report from you, then we would bring in your report. We would have them do the Berkman and the COPs if they hadn't already done those, and we would start with that, and really use that not as much to plan, because yes, we are going to use them in the planning process in the RAP meeting, but that's not really where we use them. That's more for our staff to really understand the student and really get an understanding of where they came from, right? So it's more, and I tell people, it's more for us and less for you. It's just us getting caught up on your last 18, 20 years, whatever.
Sure.
As best we can, right? And so that's a part of it. So we start there. So that's a big part of it. So we do that assessment. We do that initial RAP meeting where they bring and they can invite their parents, but it's up to them. Some of our students do, and we totally support it, and some don't, and we understand and support that too. It's for good reason. But they bring in who they want in the meeting, whether that's a psychologist like you, it's maybe if they're a current student in high school, maybe it's their case manager, maybe it's a counselor, teacher, whoever. We do that initial RAP meeting, and we all as a team develop goals. We review the strengths from the Berkman, we review the strengths in the COP system, and we use that to drive the planning. We set goals, similar to PCP. We assign responsibility for who's going to do those goals. And
Mm-hmm.
those goals are really what will guide the services that we provide to the student. Now, with that in mind, there are some kind of what I call skeletons or some frameworks around which those services generally look like for everybody, with some tweaking, of course. The first being they have weekly standing meetings with their connections coach, and so that can be in person, that could be on a Zoom, that could be even a FaceTime. Honestly, it could even be a text. Generally, though, we like it to be either in person or Zoom. We want to see them, physically with our eyes. And so we do that, and that's a standing appointment every week, and we make it standing. That way, it works around their current semester class schedule, so we don't have to worry about oh, I got this or I got a project or whatever. And so we do that, and that is a sacred meeting. They have that meeting every week, and it's a check-in. Some students, those meetings are 15 minutes, and that's fine. Some students, those meetings are an hour plus, and that's fine. If they have a lot to work on and a lot of problems that we need to help them work on and push through, then that may be an hour and a half meeting, and that's okay. So we do that. So that's one standing piece. We also provide additional support as needed, but it's based on student requests. So we're not going to push ourselves into their lives, push ourselves into their schedule. If they need more support than that standing meeting, we are there. Text, phone call, Zoom, whatever. We're there. In person, great. But that's based on student initiating and asking for help, which I know is a challenge for some students, and I get that. But again, we're not going to give them support they don't want or don't need.
Yep.
So that's that. That's the other big piece, and that's the core around the service. So the wraparound piece, the initial assessment, of course, the core meetings every week, the additional support is needed, and then the part that I'm most excited about, and the part that is going to be honestly the most interesting for us to figure out, to be honest. And that is, we want to offer. We're going to offer weekly activities and or skills training groups. So those activities may be something like a virtual activity. It may be something where we're just doing a social, something, or maybe we're playing, I don't know, online Uno, or we're doing something just, again, just completely social. It really, there's no quote unquote instructional, objectives to it. Although, as I'm sure social activities have a lot of instructional objectives and a lot of instructional benefit. But that may be something. And then the next week, we may offer a skills training group where we're doing a whole session on how do you write a resume. And so we're doing a resume training group, and that may be virtual, that may be in person. We're also going to bring in guest speakers, and I'm going to try to purposely do a lot of those via Zoom, because then we can broadcast them to all of our different sites.
Yeah.
So students at any of the schools, at any of our program sites, can actually, watch this great speaker or watch this really good, presenter or topic maybe.
Yeah.
And so it'll be a combination of virtual and in-person activities and virtual and in-person skills groups. What's key about that, though, is we are going to offer something different every week, because what we know is not every student is going to need every topic every week. And that's okay. We're not going to make them go to a class. Oh, no, you got to go to the weekly class. We got to work on a resume. Oh, I already have a resume. Well, too bad. You got to go to it. That's part of the program. No, we're not doing that. Now, I know a lot of programs that do that. We're not doing that. I don't like that, because what we're doing is we're forcing a student to get support they don't need. What we're doing instead is we're going to offer them a menu, and we're going to say, pick what you want. Great. So this week's skills group's on resume development, and you say don't need that. Cool. Well, guess what? Next week's group is on using LinkedIn and building a LinkedIn profile. Do you have a LinkedIn profile? Oh, no, you don't? Okay. Well, what about next week? That would be a good one for you to come to then. Great. We can help you work on that. Don't come this week. You're good. If you got a resume, you got a resume. Same with social activities. We may do a virtual D&D group. Well, some students love D&D and some students don't. I personally think it's fun, but it's not for everybody.
Right.
And that's okay. So that's a really important thing. And so it's funny, because I ask like parents or VR, and of course, and parents and VR have one thing in common, and that is they want structure. They're like, so those are mandatory, right? And I'm like, nope. And I think it just baffles them that they're not. And I'm like, they're not mandatory because not every student needs the same thing. So that's why they're not mandatory. They're individualized. They're offered, but they're not required. Now, if a student never comes to any activities or never comes to any groups, well, yeah, we're going to have a conversation with them, because we're going to say, hey, you're paying for this. Don't you want to use some of it? But if a student is sick one week, or I don't know, has a social life and wants to go to a party or wants to go to a school organization, we're not going to be like, no, buddy, you got that meet. Remember, you got that skills group. You tell your friends, no, can do. You got to be in the skills group. No. Why would you ever? And a great example I tell people is, would you ever tell a student without a disability in college to do that? No.
No.
Then why are we creating this unlevel playing field and these unreasonable expectations?
Yeah. And you know what, to be quite honest, James, like, they are meeting with a coach weekly.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
there are rails. And I think that's
there are rails.
Right? That's what like parents worry about. Like, oh my gosh, there are no rails, there's no safety net. And it's like, no, no, no. There's a mandatory weekly meeting with a coach, their coach,
Yes.
every
Yes.
week. And that's an
Correct.
opportunity to say, hey, I know that you don't usually like to go to those resume, LinkedIn kinds of skills groups, but um, you got some jobs, like job applications coming up. Like, how
Yeah.
are you planning on solving that
Yeah. Are
situation?
you going to do that?
Right. You don't have to go to the meeting, but I'm curious about it because
Yeah. Yeah. What
I
are you going
see
to do?
that. Right.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's really
Totally.
kind of empowering them to make some of their own choices and to live by their choices.
Yes. Well, and to have those consequences, for example, and again, maybe, and this is an example I thought up with my staff. We said, what if that student wants to go to the LinkedIn group, but they're like, hey, the time you picked is a time I got a project or I got a group I got to do or whatever study group. Great. Then their coach can catch them up the next week and we can provide some of that instruction for them. We're also going to record all our stuff too and basically create like a big repository for recorded sessions,
Sure.
which you can do very easily now with thanks to technology. So we're also going to have it where, oh, cool, you didn't see it. Well, it's on a recording. You can watch it. So,
Yeah.
Thanks to Zoom and all that, it's wonderful. But we're going to do that. And like you said, but there is, so I love how you put that on. I am going to steal it. Sorry. Rails. That
Take
is
it.
what they are.
Take it.
Because
Take
it's
it.
true is there are rails. And I'll tell you the second rail, and I don't know how clear I made this, but we do that initial wraparound meeting, but then there's monthly check-ins
Yeah.
with the whole wrap team.
Yeah.
And so those are really the two rails. It's those monthly wrap meetings and it's those weekly meetings. And if students don't attend those things, yeah, we are going to have conversations with them, with their family, and with VR, because if they're not taking advantage of the service or they don't want to be there, well, it's also not fair for us to utilize taxpayer funds to send a student to a program who doesn't want to be there and doesn't participate. So, and that's reasonable. And so, we
Yeah.
have those rails, like you said. But I think what I worry sometimes we do, and I don't, to be fair, I don't think this is just, any state or just any program, but we try to make this neat little box and we want every student to squish into the box. And it just doesn't work that way. It just doesn't. As much as hard as we want to try, as hard as we're going to force it, it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
And so I think for us, what we've learned is we really need to provide true wraparound support. And true wraparound support is flexible, it's moldable. I always tell people, think of our support as like a squishy cushion. The students in the middle, and we just wrap around and fill in all the gaps and empty spaces. That's what we do.
Right.
We don't do anything more. We don't squish them to death and smother them with support.
Right.
We don't leave them real wide open with no support where we're not even touching them or helping them. We find that middle spot and we give them the support that they need to meet the needs that they have.
Yeah, the image that I had. Oh, maybe I shouldn't share this publicly. It's all right. It's fine. It's just you and I.
You're right. It's fine.
It's just you and me.
Yeah.
Is like taking a bath in Dippin' Dots.
Ooh.
Do you know that Dippin' Dots? You know what I'm talking
Yeah,
about?
the little mini ice creams. Yeah.
It'd be cold and eventually messy, but it's just like it's there. It's not suffocating, and it's
Yep.
and it's delicious.
Yeah.
Whatever, it's fine.
Yeah.
We'll go. We'll leave that idea. Gosh, when I think about the current challenges like that, I think face college students today without disabilities.
Yes.
It's almost like campus connections could be helpful for more for like college students.
Well, and it's funny you say that. So a question has come up more than once, and I'll tell you the answer. And it's not who we're targeting, but it's also somebody we would serve. Would we serve people without disabilities? And the answer is absolutely yes.
Yeah.
Now, the challenge is that VR is not going to do that.
Right.
So what I tell families is if you were willing to private pay for the service and your son or daughter didn't have a diagnosed disability, will we help them? Absolutely, we will. There's no reason not to. VR is unfortunately just not going to pay for it. That's the only downside. And so that's why I tell people that's not who we're targeting. But I'll give you a good example. Let's say you got a student, and we see this in our community all the time. We try to give extra supports to foster students, right? And students that have come through traumatic home environments, things like that. Maybe a student like that doesn't have a quote unquote diagnosed disability, but they need some support.
Yeah.
They want to go to college. Could we serve them? Absolutely, we could.
Yeah.
And I think, that's what's key. And I'm really excited about that with Campus Connections, because you're right. Like there really is no reason it has to be just people with disabilities. I think I tell people the unfortunate thing is they tend to be the folks that do have access to funding. So it's kind of a catch-22, because it's like, well, we want to fund who can get funded, but we also want to provide support to who needs it. So, but we really are open to that. And that's, again, why I'm really proud of us in terms of what we're able to do and get that price to a reasonable level.
Yeah.
I will tell you, there's one big thing we had to do though to get it there, and this comes back into who it's not a good fit for. we do not provide independent living support. At $1,000 a month, we just can't.
Yeah.
There's not enough money
Yeah.
to go in that, and there's just not enough money in that
Yep.
budget to pay staff to do that.
Yep.
There's just not. It's just math. So we don't provide independent living support. Now, do we help students in terms of executive functioning, organizing their schedule, all that stuff? Of course we do. But none of that has to be done in their home, and it won't be, at least in terms of our program. So we can, and so I have to tell people, I have to be very clear when I saying we don't provide independent living support means we don't provide it in the home. We don't, help them cook in their apartment. We don't help them clean their apartment and stuff like that. We don't. And again, it's just not in the model we have. That's just not the funding source. That's not, we just don't have that. But I think that's okay, because what I found is a lot of the students that we work with, yes, they get some support in the home because that's convenient, but it doesn't have to be there. A lot of the issues that I see come up over and over again are things that can be addressed, frankly, through a Zoom. They can be addressed in a phone call. They can be addressed on campus. They can be addressed at a coffee shop just as easily as they can be physically in a student's apartment.
Yeah.
And so that's the only piece I tell people. So I tell families, if you're looking for an independent living component, you really do need to look at a CLE, CIP, something like that has more independent living pieces. And I would refer you there myself, because they do that, and that's wonderful. Now, granted, you're going to pay for that, and you need to be aware that you are going to pay for that service a lot more than we charge.
Mm-hmm.
But if that's what they need, that's okay, because that's what they need. And that's, and again, we're not the program for everybody. We're not trying to be. A good my colleague Deanne brought up this point. She said, we're a good program for most college students with disabilities, not all. And I agree. I'm proud of most. Most is accurate. All is definitely not accurate. Especially for a student that has real significant independent living challenges, a student who needs someone to physically rouse them out of bed every morning to go to class. We don't do that. Now we'll give them a call and we'll text them and we'll we'll help them with setting up their alarm, but we're not going to pour water on their head. We're not going to shake them. We're not going to do that.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, because any program that says that they can serve everyone is the one that you want to be careful with.
Yes.
And that if there's a student that needs that level of independent living support, and you said you could do it when you can't, that's a potentially dangerous situation. That's
Absolutely.
not good for the student. That's not in the student's best
No,
interest. And so,
not at all.
for us to be very honest about what a student's, again, this idea of like skills are, abilities are, which is so important.
Yes.
We do need to be honest with that. Not that we want to be dream killers. Bruce and I spoke
No,
about
no.
why do we feel like the tissue's got to come out when we talk to people?
Exactly.
And it's just because.
Bruce has a cry table in his office.
Oh
We call
yeah,
it the cry
no, like
table. I
I
kid you
used to
not.
have boxes of Kleenex
Yes.
in my office.
Oh, he does. Yeah.
And it's we just both agreed it's not kind nor good for us. We need to say what needs to be said.
Yes.
And we need to ask the questions that need to be asked. We're not the people you come to hear what you want to hear. And I
No,
think
not
that's,
at all.
it's hard. Sometimes that's what we do. And hopefully our lovely personalities can make up for this.
And we try. And Bruce and I have also come to the conclusion, and maybe it's because I've gotten older and I've been in this job a while, and been doing this work for so long, and my heart's in it. But I'm okay if somebody doesn't like me because I've
Yes.
told them what they need to hear.
Agreed.
I'm okay with that. I'm a big boy. I got over that a long time ago. Like I'm not going to lie. When I was a teacher, especially a first year teacher, I cared a lot. But now I'm like, you know what? I did my job. I did what I said I was going to do, which is give them an honest assessment and an honest evaluation feedback. That is what my job is, and I did that.
Yeah.
And I can sleep at night. I can handle that.
Yes.
If there's some anger, even if there is some sadness and some frustration. I also tell families a lot of times I'm as frustrated as they are. Like, families will come to me and say how they're frustrated with the schools, and then I'll read their IP and I'll say, so am I. They've been doing nothing for 12 years. They've been doing nothing, and so I'm like, I feel you, I hear you, and I agree. But let's talk about the future. Let's own the feelings and talk about the future, and what can we do to change it now?
Yeah, and that's what we're faced with now.
Yes.
Like, whatever happened before, that's fine. And that's why sometimes, I resist the urge to know the full origin story.
It's a good point.
Because not that I like it just because I'm curious and I'd like to integrate all of those pieces. But the reality is, this is what the student is doing right now.
Yes.
Or not doing right now. And there are some things I know are critical for being an adult. So
Yes.
that's what we're really rubbing up against. And I think there's just a practicality and a reality to that message that those of us that are in this and in the trenches and are so passionate about it, really stand by. Because again, we're not doing anyone any favors. Actually, it's a disservice to our clients and,
I,
and the
I
students that
agree.
we work with,
Well,
Okay.
and
So,
then
yeah.
ethically, we never want to set up a student for failure, right?
No.
Like I never going to be
I
responsible
know.
for giving a student a goal that I know is not reasonable and then failing and me having to own that failure. I can't live with that personally. I'm like, I can't not knowing that I could have told that family the truth or told that student the truth about what they should be focusing on.
I know. It's so true. It's so true. Yeah, I know. I feel like I'm just delivering bad messages or hard messages to hear all the time. Um, hey James, I like to end a lot of my interviews this way. Um, because I don't know, because it's fun. So I'm going to ask you this. I'm
Oh,
going to
you have
ask you
me
this
nervous.
question because it's fun. If you could only choose one skill to empower an individual with, what would it be and why? Only
Oh
one.
gosh, this is a hard question. Actually, though, I have the perfect answer. At least I think it's perfect answer.
Yeah.
Asking for help. You can get almost anything done if you know how to ask for help.
Mhm.
Who and how. If you can do that, you can get almost anything done. You can get almost any problem solved. There's always a person, and I mean always a person. That's 100%. I mean that.
Yeah.
That knows how to get through what you're going through if you're brave enough and humble enough to ask for the help. And so that's hands down the skill. And I've seen students thrive in the workplace because they knew how to ask for help. And I've
Yeah.
seen students and in college, and I've seen students struggle and flounder and fail in college and in the workplace because they were just too proud to ask for help, or because even worse, they saw it as a sign of weakness, which is actually the opposite of what it is.
Yes.
I would say asking for help, hands down. If I could get anything to any student, if I could teach them one, that is it, hands down.
Love it. I love it. That's that advocacy piece,
Yes.
which you and I both know. There are a bunch of skills. It's a skill set. Asking
Yes.
for
Oh
help
yeah.
is
It's
a
not
skill
just one thing.
set.
Yes.
Yeah, obviously. I mean, but I love that question only because for us it really helps us identify what's the biggest lever to pull. And when they get to be adults, we have to look at resource allocation. It's
Yes.
critical, and not only in just, I'm not talking just about money, but about
Oh
time
no.
and energy and emotions
Yes.
and attention, you know,
Yes.
um, and that we want it to go somewhere. So I love that, your program brings them from college and really helps guide them to get that job after college by really bespoking the program. So, and that's something I like always like, I don't know, I shake my head at this for transition programs. I'm like, we just went from individualized educational programs to
Yes.
general transition programs where now you have a rotation at Edible Arrangements and Petco, but you have no
Yep.
interest in either.
Well, the only reason you're doing it is because it's the only place the school district has, and so
Yes.
you and Sammy and your friend Joey and the 5 kids behind you next year will do the same rotation at the
Yes.
same place, even though they have no interest either, and that helps who? No one.
I know. I listen. So
That
anyway,
helps no one.
so
That helps
thank
none of the students,
none of those.
unless you
Thank
really want to work there. If you do, that's great,
Yeah, no,
and
I mean,
maybe you occasionally get the one that does, and then it is great.
that's
But
lottery.
again, yeah, it's a lottery. Yes,
It's a lottery. I mean, I love it when it works, but when it doesn't work, I'm like,
which is most of the time when it doesn't work.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
because we're having to carve out, we're
yeah.
like just dying for someone to do an internship in this, to raise goats. You know, I
Mhm.
I'm not even kidding
Or,
about it.
the
Like,
one I love is mortuary. We had a student in one of our camps. She wanted to be a mortuary assistant. She wanted to work in a funeral home.
yeah,
Her school district, I'm telling you right now, her school district told her parents, we can't do that.
why?
We can't get her. We can't do that. They said we don't we're not comfortable. They said we're not comfortable doing that. Nope, we're not going to go ask a. That was literally what they told the family. They told the student, your goal is not a good one. We're not doing that for you. Keep in mind they had like 3 funeral homes in town, which they could have easily have talked to, but they didn't like the idea, so they told her we can't do that. So guess what she went? She went to Burger King instead. She hated it. She hates the smell of the oil. She hates it. She hated it so much. The mom actually pulled her out of the 18 plus program and said, fine, they won't do it. I'll call the 3 funeral homes and I'll get you one. Because she's like, because that's what you tell me you want. And by the way, she did get to do it with us. So she worked with us in our camp, and we made sure that she got to go to the one that's near our office so she could actually get the experience she told us what she wanted. And
Yes.
and it was a great goal, by the way. And just so you know, a lot of people, I've told that story and they're like, well, let me guess, she hated it. Nope.
No.
She loved it. She thought it was great. You know why? She hates weird smells. She hates loud sounds. She's like, working with people that, and she said, working with people that are dead is awesome. They're quiet. It's calm. I like it. So that's what she said. And she was
Hey.
high functioning the autism spectrum. And she, swear to God, she actually got her VR counselor to look up. There was a training program out of state, and her VR counselor paid for her to go to it.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we got to trust that our young people have an idea about
Yes.
where they want to be. I mean, I had someone that said, I just want to work at Target. And I was like, okay, cool. Why?
Okay.
And it's like, I love opening boxes. I love it. And I love putting things away. And I was like, yeah. So, I mean, talk about a star of unboxing merch, stocking merch,
Oh yeah.
unboxing. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
couldn't stop them. Loved it.
Yes.
It was like
Yes.
Christmas every day for this person. And I was like,
Well, and for
how
the employer,
oh, I
the employees hate doing that. So to get an employee that loves doing that, they're
no,
probably like, they died and gone to heaven. They're like, oh my God, you're the best employee of all time. You know?
right.
Yeah.
And I'm like, there's
Yes.
nothing wrong with those types of goals because
Yeah.
they know what they want to do. So why are we? I don't know. Anyway, you and I could talk more about this. Anyway, thank you
Yeah.
so much, James. I'm going to put
Yeah.
all of your links, obviously, in the description so that people can get a hold of you. And maybe when you do open up in California, because I know that's not if, it's when, we'll come, like, let's do another update on it
Definitely.
so that we can
Definitely.
just let people know. So thank you.
Definitely. Definitely. No, I'd be happy to do that. Yeah, definitely.
Thanks, James.
Awesome. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for spending your time here. If you're interested in finding out more about James and the Campus Connections program, the information is in the description below. If you got any value from this interview, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Doing so helps to get this information to others just like you. See you in the next video, and thanks for watching.